So hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Atlantic Council this morning. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the release of our Atlantic Council strategy paper on Iran, entitled A New Strategy for U.S.-Iran Relations in Transition, authored by our own distinguished fellow, Ellen Leibson.
Through the report, and here was my immediate reaction. It's a terrible report for the next 21 days, okay? Where I'm afraid the conversation about what to do with Iran is going to be limited, probably including tonight, to a series of bumper stickers about whether the deal was good or bad. It's a superb report for everything after November 9th, okay? So a good thing to get it out there and circulating for the next couple of weeks, because whoever wins the presidency is going to have to go deal with a much more complex, and I think in many ways much more nuanced Iran policy than we've had.
But they pose a problem for U.S. naval forces, for the Gulf naval forces. They're very hard to deal with. And to counter that technology, we have to invest in very expensive mine-clearing equipment. So the dollar cost terms are a tough way to look at it. But I think it is worth pointing out that they do have legitimate defense needs. My name is Michael Connell. I work at the Center for Naval Analyses, and I'm a senior scientific analyst there. I think Iran's role is both problematic and in other ways helpful. I mean, it's an ambiguous role. I think from the U.S. perspective, Iranian support for non-state actors is particularly problematic and destabilizing. On the other hand, Iran is combating ISIS, and that's something where actually U.S. and Iranian goals overlap. But it's a problematic relationship, but has the potential to get better over time, particularly in the wake of the nuclear agreement. I think that the nuclear agreement was a good step, but it was a very limited agreement. I mean, it was fixed in time. It was focused on limiting Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons for a fixed period of time in return for some sanctions relief. So it's very limited. The real question is, where does it go from here? Does it improve over time? Do aspects of the relationship deepen, or does the agreement just stick to those limited confines and then eventually expire? Well, the plan, I think, is clearly to protect the Syrian regime, Bashar al-Assad's regime, and to reestablish Syrian government control over the whole of Syrian territory. I think that's the objective. I think the Russia-Iran relationship is deepening. There are a lot of areas where they're collaborating right now. I think it's problematic from a U.S. perspective because, from the U.S. perspective, it's exacerbating sectarian tensions in the region and contributing to various problems between Sunni and Shia, between between the Kurds and between the Shia in Iraq, between the Kurds and the Sunni government, and between Bashar al-Assad's regime and the Kurds in Syria. It's creating a maelstrom that I think that the U.S. is very wary of, and it's concerned about Russia's actions and Iran's actions in the region. No, I don't think Iran will be open to statehood. Either, it's certainly not in Syria, and I don't think in Iraq as well. I think Iran's very closely allied with the government in Baghdad and the government in Damascus. And I think those governments are very much opposed to an independent Kurdistan. So I don't see Iran backing that. And Iran also has its own Kurdish population, and there have been tensions between that population and the central government. So I think it's concerned about the possibility of a greater Kurdistan, so to speak, across those countries. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. It depends on who's elected on both sides. For the Iranian side, it's all hypothetical at this point. For the U.S. side, I'm not terribly optimistic because if either candidate's elected, neither one is particularly forward-leaning in terms of talking about engagement with Iran. But at the same time, the agreement's in place, and it'd be difficult to roll back the agreement at this point. So we'll have to see.
Part of my thunder may have been stolen by the last question, but I think the focus on replacing the United States might be going a bit too far. But I would take Mr. Hanjani's comment during the discussion earlier as about where a lot of people, certainly in the region, think Iran is, that Iran sees itself not as a major but as a superpower in the region and with a sphere of influence. The problem with that is, leaving apart the specific manifestation of that, which is creating alternative powers and undercutting the governments of 3 Arab states and supporting the 4th, which is waging war against much of its population, that is extremely destabilizing, and our tradition since World War II has been to operate on a global system of collective security against regional wannabe hegemons and spheres of influence. We take a lot of risk doing this against really serious powers in the South China Sea and Ukraine. And we're faced with perhaps the need of doing that vis-a-vis Iran in the region. Is this, from terms of the report, something we don't need to worry about, or something that we can overcome by outreach, people-to-people contacts, good diplomacy, and economics? Thanks. Well, that's what we're here today to talk about. I'm very worried about that. I think that, however, Iraq and the Iraqi people have a desire to be independent of Iran, and I think they will find a lot of support in the international community for maintaining their independence from Iran.
Well, I think Ambassador Jeffries, the U.S., this was of the U.S.'s own making. I mean, the U.S., there was dual containment in the 90s, and Iraq and Iran were balancing each other out. Neither Iraq wouldn't go eastward, and then Iran wouldn't go westward. And the United States, under President Bush, took that away. They went and invaded Iraq, removed Saddam Hussein, and the Shias that were in Iran, the Iraqi Shia, went to Baghdad, and the Kurds that are now in the north were all in Iran as well. So that, in a way, we've aided that that thinking. So I think the Bush administration deserves, you know, in some ways, that they've made this monster. Amir Hanjani, board member, Atlantic Council. Well, I think that the sanctions are still remaining are quite problematic. They are prohibiting Iran from growing and from having a better economic relationship with the rest of the world. I think over time they're going to have to change, because I think Iran is in a very important market. It's a very important country that needs to be better integrated into the global economy. I think they have a security issue. I think the United States is sided with the Persian Gulf Arab countries, and Iran is countering that with their relationship with Russia. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Only because they will have their own issue with their Kurdish population.
So I think that would have been the bookend to his Iran policy initiatives. I don't expect any dramatic initiative between now and January